In the waning days of the Trump presidency, one more shot across the bow at China. Today at 4 a.m. Eastern, the New York Stock Exchange officially delisted China Telecom, China Mobile, and China Unicom shares. The move comes after President Trump signed an executive order back in November banning American investors from investing in Chinese-listed companies on American exchanges that the administration accuses of financing China's military. In a Fox Business exclusive, former Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, he's also former vice chair from Goldman Sachs, Bob Hormats joins us now. He is managing director at Tiedemann Advisors. The push and pull of yes, you're banned, yes, you're not, and now they are officially delisted. What does this mean? What message does this send to investors?
Well, starting with confusion, it also sends a message that the administration wants to put pressure on China, and it's done this to indicate its displeasure with China for a whole variety of reasons. The actual economic impact on China or the three companies is not enormous, but symbolically, it has certainly been one of many signals the administration has sent that it's unhappy with China and wants to take actions against them or Chinese companies.
Okay, so it's sort of ceremonial to try and hit China from a military level, but you're saying that investors who own these stocks were more vulnerable to any negative effects here in the U.S.
Well, the investors will be forced really to divest themselves of those stocks. And now some of the companies that are dealing in Chinese shares or Chinese financial products have also said they won't trade in derivatives that hold these shares. So it has the initial effect of having an impact on the holders of the shares, and second, on the derivative market that benefits from or holds these shares too. So it's confusing because the government and the exchange have both not been totally clear as to why these things are done and why they're done in this particular time frame.
There was some concern, or word at least, that Alibaba stock could be hit because Alipay has been mentioned by the administration as an organization, of course, a division of Alibaba that should not be invested in. There's some question about Tencent, which is the big video game and entertainment outfit, but they too have some major businesses and operations. My question right now, because there are 9 days left of this administration, post 9 days, how will the Biden administration be handling China? And will he go directly for these stocks and hit them below the equity belt, so to speak? Or does he have, if you could go inside his administration mind before it even starts, does he have a different tack?
It's unclear what tack he'll take. My guess is, and I don't know this to be certain, but I think the probability is that he will first work with our friends and allies in the region to find out what they're doing vis-a-vis China, and to see if we can make common cause with them. Second, I do think that he's sort of in a box by some of the actions that the Trump administration has taken vis-a-vis China. I mean, Biden has taken some tough positions on China verbally, but obviously he's not been president, so he has not done anything that actually directly affects China. Whether he can reverse the kind of things that the Trump administration has done, or whether he wants to, remains to be seen. My guess is that he might want to reverse some of them, but probably not all of them. And he may, if he wants to be a tougher negotiator, keep a few of them, maybe not all, but a few, as sort of leverage to get the Chinese to do more of what he wants, which is protection of intellectual property, protection of trade secrets, agreements on how you deal with information, privacy of information, what you do with individual American investors to make sure they have rights in China that are fair.
We have this breaking news. The State Department, Bob, has designated Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism. Of course, that is the opposite of the attempting to open the doors between the U.S. and Cuba that the Obama administration had worked for. Where does that leave U.S.-Cuba relations and the businesses that had already put into place some efforts to start building out there, whether it was hotel industry, some of the telecoms here in the U.S. like AT&T?
Well, that's another thing. I mean, the confusion that comes when you sort of quickly announce things and don't really prepare the market for them is unsettling at best for companies and can cost them money because they have been sort of counting on policy moving in one direction and then it moves in another. This is, of course, the first I've heard about the Cuban thing. So obviously companies that had hoped that they could establish a position in Cuba will find that for the moment they can't. Now, they may find that the Biden administration has a different view on this, and they may just wait and not do anything until Biden comes in and see what he and his administration say about these things before they actually take any action or feel forced to take any action.
Well, as we see, the administration, the current administration, is still making moves with just 9 days left. Bob Hormats, thank you very much.